Riyadh, what a fantastic start to this Wednesday morning. That's word of the day, and I'm sure it'll be back tomorrow because, I learned so many new words, but unfortunately I didn't get a chance to, join in because I'm not allowed to win a prize because I work for the company. Do you know what I mean? There are some rules here. But well done to you if you took part, and if you didn't win, well, you could always try again next time. Welcome to the Anthony Davis Show. It's 21 minutes to 10 here on the West Coast. I'm in Los Angeles, California. It's 21 minutes to 1 Eastern. Carla's producing from London, England. We are going to take a look at the morning news and see what's happening. Big story this morning is that one of the Liberal judges on the Supreme Court has announced his retirement. So Joe Biden will hopefully be able to get the chance to nominate a black female who will potentially be the first black female ever to sit as a Supreme Court judge here in the United States. So that's really the big story of the morning, but we're going to take a look at the morning papers, find out what's happening everywhere. Backchannel, as you know, is the only place you can listen to and watch and chat with hosts of live shows right here on your device. If you've got an Echo Show device, then just wake it up, say the word "say" and then your message. And if you don't have an Echo Show but you'd like to watch us on YouTube, you can do that. And you can message via backchannel.tv. So today we'll be looking at a view of America across the newspapers, from Montgomery to Alabama to the Southern Baptist Convention that wrestled with how it should address the January 6th riots. We'll be looking at that story in some more depth. Also, a string of National Guard suicides have sparked criticism from the Texas border mission. That's to come. Time to fear the fungus. Humans have been long protected from fungal infections thanks to our nice warm blood, but climate change could ruin that. And on this day, in 1838, Tennessee passed the nation's first Prohibition Law. So we'll take a little history lesson with that as well. Hello to Doug and to Kobe and Stacy. Good morning and good afternoon. And hopefully you'll spend a bit of time with us as well. And then Hal will be here at 11 o'clock or 2 o'clock Eastern, and you can basically spend your whole morning, or indeed your entire day, with Backchannel just on your Echo Show device. I keep mine in the kitchen on top of the microwave, but I wonder where you keep yours. Let's jump into the morning newspapers. The Montgomery Advertiser is where we're going to start this morning. It says, dilemma facing Southern Baptists. Continue to debate about what to say about Christian nationalism. This is a very interesting story, isn't it? 6 months after rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 26, the Southern Baptist Convention wrestled with how it should address the event, given its significance for contemporary evangelical Christianity. While some rioters at the Capitol displayed Christian symbols, many saw it as a clear example of Christian nationalism, a term commonly used today to refer to the marriage of certain right-wing political and religious viewpoints. So how should the nation's largest Protestant denomination respond? Should messengers, the voting delegates from Southern Baptist churches, vote on a resolution at their annual meeting in Nashville and take a firm stand? This is, I find this fascinating because I'm learning about, evangelical Christianity, and in this case, the Southern Baptists, and this pull to the right, this pull to the far right in many cases, where patriotism gives way to nationalism. And of course, January 6th was an example of what happens when these people come together. Wait and see is also the headline on the Montgomery Advertiser. It says, legislature reckons with ruling striking down state congressional map. Yes, Alabama legislators were trying to come to grips on Tuesday with a federal court decision that struck down new congressional maps as unconstitutional. And with an appeal coming, a special session in swing and regular session waiting to resume, leaders said they were in the early speak to the attorney phase of the process. So that's very interesting too. There's so much happening here, isn't there, in the country, with the state legislatures, the redrawing of maps, the gerrymandering, the race against time in Congress to do something about it, because, a lot of this gerrymandering and redrawing of boundary lines is favoring Republicans and not making the vote fair. And of course, a fair vote is all you ask for in a free, democratic country. Okay, let's see what's next. Because we're going to come back to the Southern Baptists in just a little while. River Region hospitals improve ICU capacity That's the number of hospital patients positive for COVID-19 is the highest it's been since September 1st, when the Delta variant was testing the limits of Alabama hospitals. And the most recent data from the Alabama Department of Public Health showed 2,867 people were hospitalized with confirmed COVID-19 on Monday. So, okay, let's move on to another newspaper now. And by the way, if there's a paper where you live and you would like me to review it, Andy, maybe, your first time on the show, or Bob, then just let me know and we'll jump on it, because that's what we do, kind of take your lead. Staying with Alabama right now, the Birmingham News is next. It says, from Fort McKellen ashes, an enchanting revival. This is a story about orchards. 3 orchards were counted in 2017 within the rolling and forested landscape known today as the Mountain Longleaf National Wildlife Refuge. In 2021, 343 of the orchards, some in breathtaking, beautiful clusters of white and green, sprouted from mossy patches and spongy peat. Isn't that wonderful? To know that, wildlife is making the headlines in Birmingham, Alabama, which is a pretty industrial town, right? Is it a coal town? I think so. And yet, here we have, from the ashes, these beautiful, fringeless orchards in a shady bog. One of Alabama's rare and delicate wild beauties. Also on the subject of redistricting, Alabama's maps blocked, it says. The Alabama legislature's redistricting plan for 2022 will not take effect for congressional races after a panel of 3 federal court judges found the map dilutes the voting power of black residents and blocked the proposal. Well, that's good. At least it works. And look, in a place like Alabama, where you've got 27% of the population as being African American, currently I think it's 14% of districts represent them. They're so underrepresented. And of course, this is manipulation that's been done by successive Republicans to basically prevent black people from voting. 2022. You'd think I was announcing this in 1957. The 2 separate federal lawsuits were filed against the redistricting map on claims that it violates the Voting Rights Act by packing black Alabamians into a smaller number of districts, including 1 congressional district, Alabama's 7th, represented by U.S. Representative Terry Sewell, and limiting their influence in state elections. So, it's all very interesting, isn't it? That we are living through this period in history where famously fraud is being committed like a coup in plain sight. Okay, next on, we'll discuss that a little bit later, obviously, because we always do. Southern Sun, Enterprise, Alabama, this time. 100-year-old water system, topic of work session. Yes, how to keep the city's water line replacement project ahead of the city's road resurfacing was the topic of a joint city council and water board meeting, the city progress session on the 18th. The reason I'm laughing is because, they were just carrying on, the water board field superintendent, Alan Mahon, was talking about this in this private session, all right over there, miles away. And here we are, 24 hours later, or in this case, 5-6 days later, referencing him and talking about the topic of the water system in Alabama on Backchannel. I think it's kind of cute. Also, human trafficking is a big headline. Bringing hope to hopeless situations is the theme of an inaugural seminar. It says human trafficking is modern-day slavery and exists in the wiregrass. That was the message that Adrian Carpenter brought to those attending the first ever Renew Hope 231 seminar, sponsored by the Mary Hill Family Service Center, held on the 21st of January. Social workers, law officers, and counselors from Dale, Coffee, and Houston counties attended the inaugural education seminar on the 15th of January, heard from Carpenter about the facts and myths surrounding the crime. In some states, they would probably ban a conversation about human trafficking because they would think that it was in some way encouraging a critical race theory. I wish I was joking. Hannah, thank you for joining us. Nice to have you back from New York. Great to see you. Well, I can't see you. Just rest assured I can't see you. Okay, the South... Oh, I've done that one, the Southeast Sun. Next up is the Austin American Statesman. That's where we're heading now, to Texas. Fire destroys Texas French bread bakery. Oh, no. That's not fun. Investigators working inside the gutted building yesterday after a fire destroyed the Texas French bread restaurant. A longtime bakery and cafe has been in its current Rio Grande Street location since the 1980s, which by America's standards is really old. You see, I'm just used to England. When there's a fire in something, invariably they were like, yeah, this is like a 16th century building. And everyone's like, and this one's like 40 years old. The Texas French bread historic West Campus staple was destroyed after an unspecified mechanical failure caused a fire to break out in the bakery. No one was injured, and Austin fire officials said damages to the building and its contents totaled an estimated $1.6 million. The fire was ruled accidental. The fire officials in Austin said, "We were devastated at the loss of our bakery and restaurant, but forever grateful that our employees walked out unharmed," the owners of Texas French bread wrote in an Instagram post. And then also on the front of the paper, 2020 election skeptic set to review Texas social studies curriculum. Yes, a conservative scholar who questioned the 2020 presidential election results is involved in reviewing state social studies curriculum standards for public schools. Wonderful. Stephen Balk, a former professor who also has opposed the 2015 Supreme Court ruling overturning state bans on same-sex marriage, is a content advisor for the revision of standards that will guide social study courses from kindergarten through 12th grade. The Texas Freedom Network, a liberal group promoting religious freedom in education, is calling on the State Board of Education to withdraw his appointment, citing his writings calling the 2020 election a literal coup, among other things. In an essay after President Joe Biden's election, he questioned the integrity of the results, as did the former President Trump and other Republicans who continue to press unfounded concerns of widespread voter fraud. Why is it the people that tell the biggest lies also have the biggest voices? I mean, that seems to be the problem now, doesn't it? I was watching a clip from Joe Rogan. You know, he has the most popular podcast in the world. He's not a very smart man. He's kind of a dumb big mouth, right? He's not an intellectual. He's not well-read necessarily. You listen to him talk and you're like, what are you talking about? And yesterday he invited Jordan Peterson onto his show, who's another one of these people who's got a bit of a reputation for like being an intelligent person, and yet is really a very politically motivated individual. He's a university professor and an author, but he's also of the far right, and he's also a white supremacist by all other standards. And every time I hear him speak, I can recognize these undertones, but it's done very subtly. And in a way, he's using his intellect to lace his language with these racist tropes. And yesterday, him and Rogan were discussing black people not being black enough to be called black. And I was like, wow, this is the most popular show. You are one of the most celebrated authors of your day, Jordan Peterson. It's just racism, and it's tragic that it's found its way into the most popular, podcast of the modern day. I've tried to watch that, Joe Rogan thing, and I just don't get it. I really don't get it. They were talking about, it was Jordan Peterson that claimed that Michael Eric Dyson is not black. And Rogan said, unless you're talking to someone who's like 100% African from the darkest place where they are not wearing any clothes all day, the term black is weird. And that's the biggest show on the planet right now. Is there any hope for us at all? So that's the Austin American Statesman newspaper. And also a final story here. Analysis says excessive force, not the norm for Austin police. It's a new report that's found the vast majority of uses of force by Austin police officers are appropriate, but also found that incidents when force was used unnecessarily often involved officers committing policy violations and escalating the encounters. The findings are from the Kroll Associates, a New York consulting firm the city hired to review the Austin Police Department's interactions with the public and to analyze 4 years of incidents in which officers used force. The newest set of findings follow an earlier review that the firm did on the police department's training practices, which was completed in March last year. And here's an interesting fact from that report. Black people were 6.7 times more likely than whites to have force used against them compared with their representation in Austin's population. Hispanic people were 1.5 times more likely to have force used against them, according to the report. Andy, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the show. Stacy says this is just ridiculously wrong. Yes, I know. Talking about the Joe Rogan story. It's crazy world. Okay, Corpus Christi next, and the Caller Times. They lead with COVID-19, suicides, shoddy housing, and an image out of Austin of National Guard voices, border mission mistreatment. Yes, soldiers, it says, sleeping in tractor trailers, erratic pay, rampant COVID-19 spread, suicides, members of the Texas National Guard patrolling the U.S.-Mexico border under Operation Lone Star, Governor Greg Abbott's response to stem the flow of undocumented migrants. Are undocumented migrants not refugees? Should we not just rephrase that for a second? An undocumented migrant, is that not a refugee? And doesn't the European Court, or sorry, the Court of Human Rights, let alone the Court of Public Opinion, say that a refugee can seek sanctuary in the first country that they arrive in? I think it does. Because this is what we do now. We've rebranded refugees as undocumented migrants. Or the worst name that I hear said in America is illegals. People refer to illegals like animals. So yes, Greg Abbott's response to stem the flow of migrants voiced a flurry of complaints about their ongoing mission there. Abbott and supporters say he deployed the troops last year to protect Texas from a rising tide of human smuggling and drug trafficking. But critics of the operation contend that Abbott, a Republican, deployed the service members as a political move in the run-up to his re-election campaign. In this year and the operation, a mandatory mission of more than 10,000 personnel to help enforce the border may not be constitutional. And soldiers on the ground have complained of poor planning, lack of proper equipment and deployments that have stretched into months. I thought that... Yeah, but my point is that a lot of these people who Greg Abbott is referring to as undocumented migrants may be seeking asylum. They're often coming from places where they feel that life is impossible. I know that there are some coming from Mexico and where they can work and that they're not at risk, but I have no doubt that what Greg Abbott is doing is if someone says I'm seeking asylum, then they'll be like, you mean you are a undocumented migrant? Or you're an economic migrant? I just want to know that the asylum seeker rules are being adhered to on the southern border. And that's my concern, is that there is probably a lot of grey area, with people like Greg Abbott. Okay, we're gonna discuss this in more detail a little bit later here on the show. Maternity deserts grow as staff shortages close rural hospital units. Yes, I first heard about this the other day. It says a few weeks ago, a woman gave birth at Hereford Regional Medical Center, a critical access hospital in the Texas Panhandle. Or rather, the woman gave birth in the parking lot at Hereford Regional Medical Center after driving over an hour to get there. The chief executive said he'd heard it all over the years, patients giving birth at rest stops and in ambulances and in the car on the side of the road. The hospital's patients come from a 1,600 square mile area in the Texas Panhandle, and some of them just don't make it in time. But now even patients who do make it to the hospital have another variable to contend with: critical staffing shortages and exploding COVID-19 case counts. There are days when Hereford Regional doesn't have enough nurses to operate the labor and delivery unit, forcing it to divert patients 50 miles northeast to Amarillo. I mean, we've talked about food deserts, right, in parts of rural America. Now they're talking about maternity deserts. You literally cannot get to a hospital in time if you go into labor because it's so far away. The hospital's patients are traveling 1,600 miles. There's no, what, you're telling me there is not another hospital with maternity facilities? And yet people are like, oh, we don't want national health care, socialized health care. We like it the way it is. What do you get for your money? This chair sounds like someone's opening the door at the Addams Family house. Why Russia's aggression concerns the US. This is the first story we've seen about Russia, of course, because, as you know, the Ukraine story is blowing up as ever. I predicted a couple of days ago, I had some friends contact me and, they're like, are we going to go to war? Will there be a big war? And I was like, I don't think so. I really don't think so. The US was still deep in diplomatic discussions with Russia over the crisis in Ukraine when Joe Biden succinctly summed up what's at stake. Another Russian invasion of the former Soviet Republic would be the most consequential thing that's happened in the world in terms of war and peace since World War II, Biden said. His analysis, delivered during a White House news conference in January, spelled out the stark terms why Americans should care about the fate of an Eastern European nation that's roughly the size of Texas and is known for golden sunflowers, the Chernobyl nuclear disaster, and being the spark for President Donald Trump's first impeachment saga. Michael, good morning. Thank you for joining us. Banana is with us as well. Love a banana in the morning. Nice to know that you're part of Backchannel. And Doug as well is with us, and Andy and Cody and Hannah and Bob. Thank you. Lovely to know that you're part of the show. And when I say part of the show, I mean that. I mean, if you just message me via your Echo Show device, wake it up, say, and then your message, or go to backchannel.tv and you can write to me there. Type on your phone or on your laptop, however you choose to do it. Okay, let's move on now. We're going to the El Paso Times, staying in Texas. Escobar cites concerns by guard at border. This is the same story about the National Guard, feeling like they are being used as political pawns by Greg Abbott. So, same story. Also, migrant encounters in El Paso rise 71%, it says. On an icy Wednesday morning in Jonvier, Border Patrol agent Joel Freeland cruised along a stretch of border wall where someone on the Mexico side had blowtorched through a set of steel floodgates west of the port of entry. Unauthorized border crossings climbed 71% in Border Patrol's El Paso sector in the first quarter of 2022 compared to the same 3-month period a year ago. U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported 49,000 encounters October through December in the sector. It includes West Texas, New Mexico, up from 28,000 in the first quarter of last year. Apparently there's migrants coming from a dozen nations attempting to evade agents, often making multiple attempts after being quickly returned to Mexico under pandemic Title 42. The policy has reduced opportunities for migrants to legally claim asylum in the US. On the day in mid-January, see page 5. Never mind. So that's the El Paso Times. Let's move on now because we're whizzing through this morning. The Dallas Morning News is next. This is a nice tune, isn't it? I really feel like this is kind of the kind of music I like to wake up to. Omicron wave begins receding. The number of COVID-19 cases fueled by the Omicron surge has peaked in Dallas County. The county's top health officials said on Tuesday Dallas Omicron surge follows the pattern seen in other cities across the US and the world. The highly contagious variant spread quickly, shattering case records and straining already exhausted hospital systems, followed by a decline in cases in just a few weeks. So that's kind of interesting, isn't it? That Omicron really does seem to have peaked and is now on the way down because everyone's getting it, you know? I so far have not managed to get the coronavirus, but I do feel like it could happen at any time. You know, I'm very conscious of that. If you've had it and, you know, you've recovered, then let me know. If you've had it and you died, don't let me know. I just feel like it's chasing me now. You know, I've like survived this long. 2 years, fully vaccinated, boosted. I feel like I'm on the run from the Omicron, like it's got a cape and it's going to come and get me in the dead of night. But part of me thinks, you know, let's just get it over and done with already, you know? Pandemic hopes clash with reality. Also on the front of the Dallas Morning News this morning, it says American Airlines has cut thousands of flights from its schedule for the month of March. As Omicron, pilot shortages and delivery delays on the Boeing 787 planes hinder recovery from the 2-year-old COVID-19 pandemic. Yeah. I mean, this is the reality, isn't it? That you know, COVID is getting into all sectors at all levels. And it's difficult to kind of have any business, especially when it's in the service industry, kind of successfully navigate coronavirus. The Fort Worth-based airline has axed nearly 40,000 flights from its March plans since the middle of December, including more than 1,600. See page 5. I mean, page 5 must be gigantic. Like, it must be... I mean, talk about a broadsheet. You can probably wallpaper your bedroom with it. US sends weapons to a tense Ukraine, and a photograph of weapons being loaded onto a transport aircraft. It says weapons and military hardware delivered by the US military at Boryspil Airport in Ukraine. The shipment comes as tensions between the NATO military alliance and Moscow are intensifying as Russia moves tens of thousands of troops and heavy weapons to the Ukrainian border, causing international fears of a possible invasion. The US, the United Kingdom, and other NATO countries have sent arms in a bid to deter further Russian aggression. Also, an officer seen punching a man has been fired. A Dallas police officer has been fired for repeatedly punching a man. I mean, this is all that happens to police officers, isn't it? He also faces a criminal charge in connection with the case. Well, yeah, I would do the criminal charge first and then fire him later. You know, like arrest him, jail him, pending investigation, and then you don't need to fire him because he's obviously not going to be at work. Maybe they do it so that they don't have any of those additional protections from the unions and get their legal fees paid and all that kind of stuff. Paxton fails to name all of his donors. This is the Attorney General who's raised $2.8 million but misses the deadline for disclosure. Ken Paxton announced a hefty $2.8 million campaign haul, showing the competition he can still raise big bucks while under FBI scrutiny. Oh, man. These people, tell you, there's just no... these people shouldn't be allowed to be in public office. It's not illegal in America to, like, have shares in companies that you might be using in public office. It's not illegal to raise funds through various means that in any other country just wouldn't be not allowed. It's like a free-for-all. It's like a free market economy inside government. It's fascinating to me. Okay, the New York Times is next on the old newspaper front. That's where we're heading. And what do they have today? The New York Times leads with Democrats shy from return to strict limits. Governors hold line as midterms loom. Ukraine leaders react to threat with air of calm. Yes, they loathe to provoke Putin, so they've been portraying the tension at the border as normal part of daily life. Yeah, Zelensky yesterday was like, nah, there'll be no invasion. It's going to be fine, everybody. Just chill out. Meanwhile, all this military equipment's being flown in. German wavers on Ukraine and allies worry. This is a fear that hesitation by Berlin lets Russia sow division. Also, a top public school Asian students question segregation label. And finally, legal challenge hangs on word insurrectionist. A group of lawyers is working to disqualify from the ballot a right-wing House Republican who cheered on the January 6 rioters unless he can prove he is not an insurrectionist, is the headline there. Isn't that interesting? So, okay, there we go. That's the New York Times. And where are we going to go next? What do we have here? Oh, yes, we have 3 newspapers from Virginia. Talking of Virginia, there's a very good article in The Guardian today about Joe Manchin. Of course, he's of West Virginia. And I can't remember what the article says, but the headline is brilliant. The headline is, he's a villain. Joe Manchin attracts global outcry, global anger over climate crisis. And apparently his name is reviled on the streets of Bangladesh and other countries facing climate disaster as he blocks Biden's effort to curb planet heating gases. Isn't that interesting that Manchin is like, you know, there is anger and hatred towards this senator on the other side of the world in Bangladesh. They understand the consequences of him preventing the second biggest polluting country in the world from adjusting its climate output, its climate changing output. So yeah, he's a villain. That's what they call him. Joe Manchin, the villain. He's never going to make any Democratic friends ever again, is he? I mean, can you imagine like going to a dinner party being Joe Manchin now or Kirsten Sinema? I mean, what are people going to say to you? Texas primary twist after FBI raids Representative's home. This is the bitter rematch between Representative Henry Kula and his former intern-turned-progressive challenger was riveting South Texas even before the March 1st Democratic primary. Then came an FBI raid of the congressman's home, and it says while Kula hadn't been charged with a crime, law enforcement officials' extraordinary move on the lawmaker's home and campaign headquarters, 26 days before early voting begins, has upended the race. Interesting, isn't it? Fascinating, in fact. Also, how Senate Dems benefited from a GOP rules change. It says blue slip rule has allowed Dems to confirm judges during Biden's first year at a pace last rivaled by Reagan's first term. And a photograph of of Dick Durbin, the Senate Judiciary Chair, is continuing his GOP predecessor's move to nix the veto power of home state senators once wielded over circuit court nominees. Democrats have confirmed 42 judges so far. 42 judges. And House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer remains optimistic that Democrats will pass the voting rights legislation and the Build Back Better bill despite roadblocks, but offered few details about how that could happen. Yeah, they're all saying this. They're like, oh, yeah, it's going to be fine. And I'm like, really? Unless they know something that we don't. This is interesting. In Bangladesh, apparently they're very knowledgeable about the American political system. And they understand the filibuster probably more than most Americans, actually. And the reason is because, America sneezes, the world catches a cold. And if you're in a poor country, you need positive outcomes from wealthy nations. Because, of course, you receive financial aid, you receive, charitable payments. There's knock-on effects. You want the American economy to do well, because you will benefit if you're in a poorer nation, but also from an employment perspective as well, for outsourcing. On the front of the Roanoke Times, it says pipeline loses crossing permit. Yes, for the second time, a federal appeals court has thrown out government approvals for a natural gas pipeline to pass through the Jefferson National Forest. A written decision on Tuesday from the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals marked the latest round of many setbacks for the Mountain Valley Pipeline since construction began in 2018. Yes, interesting. There's a lot of these types of stories around at the moment. Lawsuit seeks to end solitary confinement. Well, it hasn't stopped me being in this box every morning, has it now? Padded cell. The ACLU filed a class action lawsuit on behalf of inmates at 2 Southwest Virginia prisons. Do you know, there was a class action lawsuit I was reading about the other day that I thought was amazing. I don't know if you've heard about this, Carla. It's by Apple employees working in the Apple store to Apple, and Apple conceded. And you'll never guess what it was about. It was about having their bags checked for stolen merchandise before and after work, which is completely fine. They don't have a problem with it. But what their problem was, is it was being done after they clocked off. And so they were clocking off and then not being paid and then waiting to have their bag checked by a manager. And there was all these hours that were adding up. And so there was a class action lawsuit of all Apple employees. And Apple have agreed to pay this huge sum of money. It's like $4.7 billion in additional pay. It's so good. And they're like, yeah, you should have had your bag checked while you were being paid. Of course. I mean, that's an example of a class action lawsuit that is, it's kind of common sense, isn't it? I mean, I don't know whether Apple fought it or whether they were just like, yeah, totally. Be interesting to know. Victoria's joined us. Good morning, Victoria, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. You can see us, I know that, so thank you for watching. Ricky is with us as well. Hello, Ricky. Ricky's listening right now, but if you get yourself an Echo show, then you'll be able to watch, or you can go to YouTube and watch there. I think we should do the US News Update in just a second as well. That would be fun. It's a podcast that I do every day on the Volley Network that you can download wherever you get your podcasts. It's just me for 2 minutes explaining what's happening across the United States, just like some of the biggest stories that are making the headlines. Things you might not know that you might need to know. It's just a little podcast you can search for. It's called US News Update. Here it is. It's Wednesday, January 26. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US News Update. I'm Anthony Davis. An appeals court judge on Tuesday granted a stay in an appeal over mask mandates in New York, keeping the rule in effect during the legal process, New York Attorney General Letitia James said. A day earlier, a judge had struck down the state's mask mandate 1 week before it was due to expire. The state's Attorney General had filed a motion to stay the ruling in an attempt to put it on hold while the state filed a formal appeal. Justice Robert Miller of the state's appeal court temporarily blocked the lower court ruling, siding with the state. Disagreements and court action over mask mandates in a number of states have become a flashpoint of the pandemic response in the United States, often dividing Democrats and Republicans. Earlier this month, the U.S. Supreme Court blocked President Joe Biden's vaccination or testing mandate for large businesses. A judge in Texas last week
ruled that Biden could not require federal employees to be vaccinated. The requirement in New York State, home to around 20 million people, include wearing masks in schools, on public transit, and other public indoor spaces. U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi said on Tuesday that she will run for a 19th term in office, without saying whether she would seek to remain in her Democratic leadership role. The 81-year-old California lawmaker was the first woman to serve as Speaker and had been expected to step down, particularly as her party braces for a possible loss of its majority in the November 8 midterm elections. Your daily U.S. news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo device to open Backchannel.
There it is. That's the US News Update. You can get it wherever you get your podcasts. The big news of the morning is the retirement of the Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer. He's a Liberal judge, and he's announced his retirement. So that means that Joe Biden will get to choose a new Supreme Court justice, and Senate Democrats are expected to move very quickly to do this. The party controls the upper chamber and should be able to advance the nomination quickly, although a confirmation would not alter conservatives' advantage on the bench, even with Breyer's replacement confirmed. The 6 conservative Supreme Court justices will still outnumber their 3 liberal colleagues. I mean, for my money, he should be putting at least 6 more liberal judges in, seeing as the country is a liberal country, you know? It's interesting, isn't it? Just misrepresented in the Supreme Court. Angel has joined us. Hello, Angel. Thank you for being part of Backchannel this morning. Rick is with us, Victoria, Banana, Michael, Doug, Andy, Cody, Hannah, and Bob. Welcome to Backchannel, and thank you for spending your morning with us. I'm Anthony Davis. This is The Anthony Davis Show, and I'm here every morning, and hopefully you would be here too as well. I'm in kind of sportswear today. I feel very informal. I'm sorry I didn't dress up. I didn't really get the opportunity to, put on a suit and tie, but tomorrow maybe a tuxedo or something more, more suitable. We've been looking through the morning papers this morning. We've been looking at Politico out of Arlington, Virginia, the Roanoke Times, and finally the News Leader in Virginia. Did we do the News Leader already? Oh, no, we didn't. We didn't do it yet. This is the final newspaper before we get on to other subjects. COVID surge swamps Augusta Health, it says. Yes, reporting the area is experiencing a very high level of COVID-19, which has been the case for several weeks. The testing positivity rate for the week of January 16 through 22 was 52.3%, with an inpatient COVID-19 census of 48, with 8 deaths over the past week, the release said. Over the weekend, from Sunday until Monday, there were 95 new positive cases of COVID-19 diagnosed at Augusta Health testing sites. Gender-inclusive housing option added. This is a story saying as a staff member and former camper at Nature Camp in Vesuvius, June Urish, has always felt the camp's culture was accepting of everyone, but they occasionally noticed that at the end of a long day at camp, non-binary and transgender campers would be forced to go back to a binary space for the night because there was separate housing for boys and girls and no other options. Well, Urish said that having a space to return to at night where campers can be truly themselves and not worry about interacting with people who may socialize differently than them is important. So that's good. They've now, put in some non-binary accommodation. Wonderful. When will we see relief from high oil prices is the headline here. It says anyone who's bought food, paid rent, or looked for a used car recently has come up against the billowing inflation that has engulfed the U.S. economy, and with not just the U.S. economy, by the way. Inflation is high, at least 5% to 7% higher all over the world, So it says, with surging oil prices keeping gasoline high, so has anyone filled up a car. Energy costs have been one of the main drivers of what's become the highest inflation in a generation. Well, if you're still putting gasoline in your vehicle, then you need to have a conversation with yourself. It's like we've had electric and hybrid vehicles now for like 40 years. It's just a decision to make. you know? Yes, it might cost you a little more in investment, but it's going to cost you a lot less in gas. And the people of Bangladesh will thank you. So let's move on in this conversation now to the story about 6 months after rioters storming the U.S. Capitol on January 6. The Southern Baptist Convention wrestled with how it should address the event, given its significance for contemporary American evangelical Christianity. And there's a very interesting story about this, suggesting that some rioters at the Capitol displayed Christian symbols, and many saw it as a clear example of Christian nationalism, a term commonly used today to refer to the marriage of certain right-wing political and religious viewpoints. And I have first-hand knowledge of this because I have a Christian friend who feels like Christianity has been hijacked by the far right. And so she's unable to go to church anymore because she doesn't feel like it's doing what it used to do, that it feels like it is not the sanctuary that it once was. And maybe you feel this too. Maybe you feel that Christianity means something else now, since this pull towards a more nationalist space. And do you think that religion should be taken there? I mean, religion shouldn't be political. It shouldn't be. The whole point of religion is it's an apolitical, it's, I would say non-denominational, but it's an apolitical space for your denomination of choice. And if you are somebody who does consider yourself a Christian, how do you feel about the way and the direction in which the religion is going? Stacy? Charisse? Doug? Feel free to let us know in the usual way. Because I'm not a religious person, I never have been, but I do recognize that a belief system is healthy for people that need it. But the problem is that, you can preach the gospel without preaching politics. And I've watched so many of these sermons now that are taking place, in the Midwest or the Deep South. They're all on YouTube. And I watch these preachers in sneakers, and it's all political now. It's all Trump, and it's all this anti-immigration rhetoric, and it's all small government, and these people are poor. They're really struggling in many cases, and yet they're drawn to the church for a sense of community, and it impresses upon them a political opinion that is quite racist, to be honest. And their desire to take America back to how it was, like in the olden days, before the demographic change, before the influx of migration, before the shade of the American changed from white to black. In their lifetime. I mean, this is the problem. And they always talk about, it used to be like this, it used to be like that. They have memory from their childhood, or they're hearing their parents be, institutionally racist and not realize quite how racist they were. And really that's the tragedy of this whole thing, is people feel marginalized, and so they crave a return to a place in their minds that was kinder to them and warmer and less threatening. It's just fear. The whole movement is fear-mongering. Migrants are not bad. They're actually really good. These people, would you trek with your children on your back and the very last few possessions you have for thousands of miles on foot, or in a boat that can barely hold water to seek a new life? These are not bad people. These are good people. I'm a migrant myself. I'm a permanent resident in the US now, but I really had to work hard to get my immigration status. They want to know that you're doing well. They want to know that you are going to contribute to American society. Iron, thank you for joining us. Welcome from California. Nice to know that you're here. Stacy says, some believe maybe it's a bad thing if you believe the wrong thing. All those can be good because you believe. Couldn't have said it better myself. So yeah, this is the story really that kind of, has really got to. I spend a lot of time thinking about it. I'll be honest. I spend a lot of time thinking about how religion has been hijacked by the right, and I think this is something that we need to really consider. That there are plenty of people that are happy to go there, that want to be in that far right space. But there's just as many people who want to be close to Jesus, or want a place to pray, or want to be able to get guidance or seek sanctuary in a non-political church. You can have your say, of course, because your say is just as important as mine. Go to backchannel.tv if you would like to type your message. Or if you have an echo show, you can just say the word "say" and then your message once it's woken up. Should we have a quick look at Greg Abbott, of course, because he's been deploying thousands of Texas National Guard members to the Texas-Mexico border. And we were looking at this story in the newspaper earlier about the string of suicides among Texas National Guardsmen deployed on Greg Abbott's Operation Lone Star. I mean, just calling it Operation Lone Star to me just has images of the Wild West. That's what Greg Abbott is. He's like a cowboy, isn't he? He's just a cowboy. Some military members reporting inconsistent pay, denied leave, and dangerous COVID-19 protocols. Says the scathing report published by the Army Times' Davis Winkie. Such a great name. Maybe I'll start calling myself Davis Winkie. The Davis Winkie Show. Anyway, Army Times' Davis Winkie found that 4 National Guardsmen have died by suicide, all by self-inflicted gunshot, since Mr. Abbott launched the patrol mission along the state's border with Mexico. I mean, does the governor not feel any responsibility for the loss of these 4 individuals? Do you not think that he must know about it? The report tells the story of Private First Class Joshua Cortez, who was preparing to take a lifetime job with one of the nation's largest health insurance companies before he was tapped to join the governor's troop build-up at the border, without any way of knowing how long the mission would last, and having just passed up another job after being deployed to help with food cleanup efforts in Louisiana. Mr. Cortez requested a hardship release from the mission so that he could accept the job. He said, "I've been waiting for this job, and I'm on my way to getting hired." He's 21. He said, "I missed my first opportunity in September when I had to go on the flood mission, not food mission, sorry, the flood mission in Louisiana. I cannot miss this opportunity because it's my last opportunity for this lifetime job." And then, of course, he gets conscripted for a role that is completely political and serves no functional purpose on the ground. It's just so Greg Abbott can get re-elected because he's like, "I'm a big, tough, strong cowboy, Texan, Lone Star, and I bring in the National Guard." By the way, Carla, the El Paso Times has a paywall, so I can't see any of those articles, unfortunately. I'm having to do... Yeah, not letting me read it. Maybe I've read it too many times. But I do feel like we are living in a time now where there is all this projection going on, but there's nothing actually happening. It's a little bit like the story out of Florida yesterday where Ron DeSantis, in his infinite wisdom as a doctor, which he's not, is claiming that the monoclonal antibody treatment that has been withdrawn by the health services because it doesn't work on Omicron. And he's like, it does work. We want it back. Patients should have choice. It doesn't work. But he's projecting because his donors all own huge amounts of shares in these antibody treatment. So it's like stuff is being done, a bit like Greg Abbott bringing in the National Guard. Stuff is being done not because it needs to be done, but because there is an ulterior motive, and it means that we end up living in this faux society where there's a lot of stuff happening, but nothing's getting done. And that's my worry, That's my worry here, is that we're living in this parallel universe where there's all this talk and all this action and all this misery and all these complaints, and yet nothing's actually happening. Nothing is getting done, just lawsuits. So the Davis-Winke report found that 4 National Guardsmen have died by suicide. And, it's so tragic. And this kid is going to miss this lifetime opportunity. They say while Mr. Cortez's company commander recommended that he be approved for release, his battalion commander and brigade commander, Colonel Robert Crockham, denied the request. Sometime over the next 36 hours, Mr. Cortez drove to a parking lot in San Antonio and took his own life. At least 3 other National Guardsmen on the mission have died from suicide between October and December. Sergeant Jose de Hoyos and First Sergeant John Crutcher and First Lieutenant Charles Williams all died from what appeared to be suicides. And earlier this month, another National Guardsman on the mission died after he accidentally shot himself in an alcohol-related incident, and another soldier survived an attempted suicide during the week between Christmas and New Year's Day. So these suicides, as well as whistleblowers among the Guardsmen on social media, have raised concerns over the conditions and the purpose of the ongoing operation at the border. Command Sergeant Major Jason Featherson, formerly the Texas Army National Guard senior enlisted leader from May 2020 until his retirement, said that the mission was suffering from a lack of purpose and a lack of focus on the needs of individual Guardsmen. He said the Texas Military Department leadership has lost focus on what matters most, and that's the soldier. Their inability to focus on the individual soldier's needs has cost several lives, and until they focus more, tragedies will continue to happen. You can't take soldiers on a mission that is fake, right? These people train for doing something of value. But if you get there and the mission is fake, it's purely for, peacocking, posturing, just to kind of put on a show. It's very hard for these guardsmen because they have to leave their families, they have to leave opportunities, they leave their partners, they miss out on jobs or things that they were doing. They're being conscripted for political reasons. And, is it any wonder that 4 of them are now dead? They're not dead because of violence at the southern border. In a press release announcing the mission, Greg Abbott's office said the crisis at our southern border continues to escalate because of Biden administration policies that refuse to secure the border and invite illegal immigration. Goes on to say that it will surge the resources and law enforcement personnel needed to confront the crisis. I mean, this posturing between state law and federal law, it's just endless, isn't it? And then they end up suing each other. You couldn't make this up half the time. Hello, Mark. Thank you for joining us. Danny says, every day I feel like I'm living on the movie set of Wag the Dog. Yeah, I feel that. I really feel that. Stacey says, I say that some people just don't care. And Danny says, whatever the question, Greg Abbott's answer will always be more guns. Should we talk about the fungus? There's plenty of things in this world that might keep you up at night. There's COVID-19, of course. But what about what's likely that's not high on your list is fungi. Yes, unfortunately, that might be changing because in 2009, a patient in Japan developed a new fungal infection in their ear.
The highly transmissible Candida auris fungus has been previously unknown to science and resistant to drugs available to treat it. But within a few years, cases started emerging in Venezuela, Iran, Russia, and South Africa. Scientists assumed the spread was due to human travel, but when they sequenced the cases, they were surprised to see that these strains weren't closely related at all. Instead, scientists were seeing multiple, independent infections of an unknown fungal disease emerging around the world, all at the same time. About a third of people infected with Candida auris die from the infection within 30 days, and there's now been thousands of cases in 47 countries. Some scientists think this sudden boom in global cases is a harbinger of things to come. Dr. Arturo Casadevall, a microbiologist at Johns Hopkins University who studies fungal diseases, says humans should consider ourselves lucky that they don't have to constantly worry about fungal infections. If you were a tree, you'd be terrified of fungi. And if you happen to be a fish, a reptile, or an amphibian, fungus would also be quite high on your list of fears, were you able to enumerate them. Because they wipe out snakes and fish and corals. Do you know, I feel like I've had a bit of an ear infection for about 4 months. Ever since I got an ear infection. It's so weird. I feel like it's never really gone away. Maybe we've all got the fungus. Maybe that's what it is. I had antibiotics. I saw 3 different doctors because no one could work out what it was. And so it cleared up. The pain and the dizziness cleared up after I took the drugs, and I took steroids as well. But I still feel like a presence in there. It says in recent years, a fungal infection called Bacteriotrichium dendrobatitis, or something, has decimated amphibian populations around the world, with some scientists estimating that chirid is responsible for population decline in over 500 amphibian species. To put that into context, that's 1 out of every 16 amphibian species known to science. I mean, now I'm worried. Now I think I've got the fungal ear infection. Yeah, this is very interesting. If your mum swims in the sea, Carla, then she definitely needs to get it checked out. She needs to go and see a witch doctor. Humans can and do get fungal infections, but people are generally unlikely to fall to a fungus for one big reason. Humans are hot. And if you want to be the pedant at a party, you might enjoy learning that humans are generally not, in fact, the commonly cited 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The number comes from a German study done in 1851. In fact, human body temperature seems to have been cooling recently, and the global average is between 97.5 and 97.9 degrees Fahrenheit. I thought that was BBC London. Warm-blooded environments in general tend to be too warm for a fungus to survive. One of the studies estimated that 95% of fungal species simply cannot survive at average human internal temperature. Well, that's good to know. I mean, my temperature is very consistent, It's always somewhere between 96 and 104. When you look at animals that hibernate, which requires dropping their internal temperatures to survive the winter heats, bats, for example, and I'm not happy with bats at the moment, I'll be honest with you. Me and bats, we are not getting on. Bats have recently suffered huge declines due to white nose syndrome, which infects them while they're hibernating. So the theory really is that the animal world's long history with fungus is perhaps, crossing over. And being warm-blooded has its costs. Keeping your body at such a high temperature takes a lot of energy, which requires a lot of food. And some warm-blooded animals have to eat more in a single day than cold-blooded reptiles of the same size. Constantly seeking food.
I've definitely got this fungus in the ear because I'm constantly seeking food. Must be me. I do feel like, off the back of COVID and obviously the bats and the infection jumping from the bats in the wet market to humans, which is a very normal thing, by the way. I really feel like that kind of conspiracy theory about the Wuhan laboratory is a convenient untruth because people don't know anything about the transmission of viruses from animals to humans. They have no knowledge of it, no experience of it in history. And yet suddenly they're an expert and they're like, no, that never happened. It must have been the Wuhan lab. There's labs in every city that study viruses. It's not like a coincidence. And also, Wuhan is enormous. It's enormous. Not some tiny village with a wet market and a lab and that's it. Wuhan is huge. My point is that we need to accept the fact, as Dr. Anthony Fauci tries to reiterate over and over again, that this is how viruses, new viruses, appear in humans. They jump from the animal kingdom. And as long as we continue to, eat food that is unregulated, like in wet markets or from wet markets, food that has not been, cleared for consumption, where hygiene standards are not particularly high, these things will continue to happen. And they've known about the potential of this happening for ages. I mean, the report that was left behind by the Obama administration for the Trump administration about the potential for a worldwide pandemic, this report was done. And there's a wonderful documentary on Netflix that came out about 3 months before the pandemic called Pandemic. And it explains what would happen if a SARS-like virus got into the human population and became a worldwide pandemic, and how the world would cope. And the predictions by the scientists that were interviewed and the reconstructions that are done in the documentary are, to say they're accurate is an understatement. It is eerily weird. And of course, there are conspiracy theorists that go, oh, well, you see, this was all done by the government. That's how they were able to make this documentary, because it was all planned. People don't have the intellect to be able to intellectualize conceptually that these things happen to humans because there hasn't been one in 100 years. So they're like, that can't be happening. Can't be. It doesn't happen to us. It does happen to us. It's happened before. The Spanish flu happened in 1917. We had SARS. We had MERS. We had HIV, for goodness sake. These were all epidemics, or pandemics of epidemic proportion, and yet they were contained and controlled and managed through therapeutics and drugs and personal protective equipment, and more importantly, in the case of SARS, this tracking and tracing. It was very well done. Anyway, I do recommend the documentary called Pandemic on Netflix. Just a few minutes left of this show. Should we talk about the Tennessee Prohibition Law that was passed on this day in 1838? I think that would be a good idea. The bill stated that all persons convicted of retailing spirituous liquors would be fined at the discretion of the court, and that the fines would be used in support of public schools. I think they should bring that back, to be honest. Don't you think they should bring that back? Like, public schools are so desperate for money, and people are drinking way too much unnecessarily, and it's just killing them. Bring on the prohibition. I'm for it. Maybe you're doing a dry January right now. Maybe this is your kind of annual contribution to prohibition. Don't drink in January because you drank too much in December. But, I know people that have done dry January and they've extended it through February, March, and April, and before you know it, they gave up alcohol altogether. And it's essential because, coming off it, it's a bit like me and sugar. Coming off it is the hardest part. The first week is the hardest part. But if you've successfully done all of January and you know that drinking or sugar or any of these addictive substances that are unhealthy and are ultimately going to make you ill, be responsible for your liver failure or your cholesterol or whatever it is. Even mental health, sugar and mental health don't go well together, and alcohol certainly doesn't. But now that we know that these things are bad, and we know that they are considered to be vices and addictive vices, if you are lucky enough to have managed January, try February. Yeah, it's the withdrawal, isn't it? Like it takes at least a month to get off of these things. Your body needs 3 months to kind of recover and recalibrate. But, I had this when I stopped eating meat and dairy in November 2019. It took my body maybe a week to feel better. My body was so grateful, it literally said to me, thank you. My cholesterol went from 228 to 186. My walking speed, as in my hiking speed that I measure with my watch, went from a 23-minute mile to an 18-minute mile. All from stopping eating dairy and meat, which was weighing me down, slowing me down. And it wasn't even weight loss necessarily that did it. It's just the quality of the fuel that you put in. You wouldn't put like petrol into a diesel vehicle or diesel into an electric vehicle. You got to get the fuel right. And as humans, we don't need much. We really don't. We need like a handful of leaves. I mean, the strongest man in the world, I think he's from Uruguay or somewhere, some nation. I think he's Eastern European. But maybe he lives in America now. Anyway, strongest man in the world. He has a handlebar moustache. He's quite fat. He looks like a short Andre the Giant. Only eats plants. Only eats plants. The guy can lift an aeroplane, carry a house, drag a combine harvester. The guy only eats plants. So this whole rhetoric of, meat is going to make you strong and milk is going to make you strong, it's just not true. It's just marketing. It's the meat lobby. It's the food industry. So let's have a quick look, just in the last couple of minutes, we'll just look at this story. It says, each state's prohibition and repeal experience was both similar yet unique. Prohibition in Tennessee, along with its repeal, was no exception. It was actually welcomed when it first happened. Temperance had a long history in the state. By 1907, the sale of alcohol was prohibited throughout most of Tennessee. 10 years later, statewide prohibition occurred. Then it became illegal for anyone to possess any alcoholic beverage. But you can have as many guns as you like. The popularity of national prohibition in Tennessee reflected the fact that most residents thought it would be beneficial. They thought it would lead to improved health, less violence, and greater safety, and that it would increase public morality and create a better environment for young people. The General Assembly voted almost unanimously for it. But many people were not willing to give up their freedom to drink, and the state's rugged terrain was ideal for hiding moonshine stills. Moonshine. With easy, untaxed money to be made, police and sheriffs were routinely bribed. Politicians were also widely on the take. The rampant graft and corruption caused by prohibition created a deep lack of respect for the law. It became fashionable to flaunt it, especially among women and young people. For the first time in history, women began to drink in public. Prohibition also led to the pattern of infrequent but very heavy drinking. People didn't go to a speakeasy to have a leisurely drink with a meal. They went to guzzle alcohol while they could. And then bootleg alcohol was carelessly made. It often contained lead toxins, and in addition, some bootleggers added creosote and even embalming fluid. Delicious. At least when you died of it, they didn't have to embalm you. You were practically ready to go. Consumers sometimes suffered paralysis, blindness, or even death, and this led to some drinkers in the state to switch to hair tonic, mouthwash, and illegal drugs. This would have been unlikely in the absence of prohibition. Anyway, it was repealed in 1933. Nevertheless, states were able to have their own prohibition. Tennessee decided to maintain its, but it repealed that in 1937. So there it is. Temperance sentiment still endures in neo-prohibitionism. For example, Tennessee still prohibits the Sunday sale of spirits, and this is despite the fact that Sunday is the second biggest shopping day of the week. Well, there it is. That's Springer's final thought. Thank you for joining me today here on Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. I'll come back tomorrow morning and we'll do it all over again. Hello and thank you to Donna Cha and Kimberly as well, and Danny for all of your messages. I appreciate that. She said in solidarity, or Angel says in solidarity, I stopped drinking as well. Don't miss it one bit. Danny says congratulations. What on being a vegan? And Angel says my husband had to stop drinking because it gave him pancreatitis. And Randy's joined us as well, so thank you. Thank you very much. It's nice to spend the morning with you. I'll come back tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock Pacific. Stay with Backchannel for your pal Hal. He's next.